Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. Hello. This is episode number 283 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and it is also episode number 3 in the Journey into the Wild Soul series. So if you have been listening to the podcast for a long time, you know that normally we do interviews most of the time. I will interrupt the regularly scheduled interview schedule sometimes for some solo episodes. But this is something I really felt excited to do at the end of the year, and I look forward to turning into a tradition, which is the 6-week series to wrap up the year called Journey into the Wild Soul, where I get to take you through some reflections on this year and perhaps years previous so that we could leave the past in the past as we transition into a new year, as well as invite you to consider if how you've been going about your growth, healing, and transformation is really effective, or if it's more performative, obligatory, inefficient, ineffective, or just a distraction. So this is about real deal empowerment, and to be clear, I'm not out here trying to empower you because I can't do that. You have to do that for yourself, but I can certainly help you empower yourself. So that's what we're talking about here during the 6-week series, and we're approaching it from different angles with the intention of helping you to connect to the love and truth inside yourself. So this is about taking you on an adventure of your inner world to help you have better outer world experiences in 2019 and beyond. So if you're just joining us, it's not necessary to go back to episode 1 of this 6-week series. While the episodes are designed to build on each other, I've also made sure they each stand alone and can be valuable out of order as well. So before we dive in real quick, I want to let you know if you're listening in real time, and today is Monday, December 3rd. As of today, registration is officially open for my new year-long Women's Circle, Power 2019. It's an expanded, updated, and upgraded version of the Wild Soul Movement virtual program I've been running since 2013. The bonuses this year are amazing. We have some monthly new moon circles, 12 guest mentor interviews, some of whom have been some of your favorite podcast guests, by the way, like Laren Alta, Evian Whitney, Rachel Maddox, Shanda Catrice, Barry Tesler, and more. Also, some of the guest mentors are my personal friends and even healers, so it's an amazing mix. And what's important to note throughout this month of December here in 2018 is that some of the bonuses will expire. So if you're considering joining, be sure to scan through the bonuses and make note of the dates so that you can sign up before the ones you want go away. And as for what's up today, specifically on December 3rd, now that registration is open, there is a very special bonus for the first 30 people who enroll. Something I've never done before and I'm really excited about because part of my own journey in 2018 was really allowing my intuitive gifts to come online, as well as to stop pretending they're not as strong as they are. I know some of you can probably relate to that. For fear of being ostracized or otherwise, which, for me personally, some of that comes from experience I've had in this lifetime. Some of it is past life trauma. So the first 30 people who enroll either today or over the next few days, I can never predict the timing on these things. I'm not that kind of intuitive. Get a one-on-one call with me, which you can either elect to be a coaching call, which looks like you showing up with anything that's going on in your life that you want some guidance and direction on, and we can go into that, or an intuitive reading, which I will use the Wild Soul Oracle deck for. So what will happen is when you enroll, you'll get a confirmation email, and my assistant Natanya will get in touch by the end of this week to schedule your one-on-one. Now you can choose to do it either before or after the new year, just sometime before January 21st, 2019. All of these details are at wildsoulmovement.com/power2019. That is wildsoulmovement.com/power2019. So let's get into today's episode. Today's episode is about embodiment. Embodiment is this is the episode that will really anchor in everything else in the rest of the series. Like everything else in the series comes back to this one thing. So what I want to do is go all in on the value of sensual intelligence. And sensual intelligence is not my term. I actually thought of this the other week and immediately Googled it to see if it was coined or already existed. Because I've learned over the years, often I'll have an idea and I'll think it's my idea, like I invented it, and only to realize that I didn't invent it. Like I had it on my own. I didn't see it somewhere else, but it does in fact already exist. So the term sensual intelligence already exists. So I want to be clear that what I'm about to say is not affiliated with a brand or a methodology. It's just my own thoughts about the topic. For years, I've been referring to this as learning to speak your body's unique language of the senses, or embodiment language, which is my term. So embodiment language entails emotional literacy. And emotional literacy is being able to name your emotions, name and claim your emotions, know what you feel when you're feeling it, right? Sometimes you'll have an experience of being like, I don't know, I'm feeling all the feels, and not be able to discern what's what. Emotional literacy means that you can really know what you are feeling, even if it's a number of things at once. So being literate in your emotions. Being able to be with your feelings without being run by your feelings is another part of this sensual intelligence. Knowing the difference between feelings and emotions and how they work together. So feelings are bodily sensations. Emotions have emotional content, but the two do overlap. Emotions can produce bodily sensations, but sometimes sensations are just sensations. They can stand alone without emotional content. Sensation could just be energy in the body or energy moving through the body. So let's put this into context. On the FAQ page for Power 2019, one of the questions that I answer is for people who first saw the program, the Women's Circle, and wanted to do it, but then got all up in their head about it or all up in their resistance about it, and now they don't know what to do. So specifically, I wrote the question out as, at first when I heard about Power, I really wanted to do it. But then I got up in my head, and now I'm not sure. Help. So here's my answer as I wrote it on the FAQ page for that. Here's a practice from Power that you could put into action right away and use to make your decision. Judgment and resistance occur in the mind. Discernment and resonance occur in the body. Note, this only works if you're not in a traumatized state or nervous system hijacked, so do be mindful of that beforehand. When you're overthinking something, you'll feel stress or pressure, and your energy will be more concentrated in your head. When you drop into your body, you're better able to feel for what's actually true for you. An easy way to do this is to take a few deep breaths. I always recommend at least 3. Place a hand on your heart, belly, or both, and say this positive statement out loud. I'm joining power for 2019. Then notice how do you feel? What do you feel and where do you feel it? After that, shake yourself out a bit to reset, take a few deep breaths again, and then place a hand on your heart, belly, or both, and say this negative statement out loud. I'm not joining power for 2019. Again, notice what you feel and where you feel it. Here's how you discern what your body is telling you. If it's a yes, you will feel positive sensations when you make the positive statement and negative sensations when you make the negative statement. If it's a no, you'll feel negative sensations when you make the positive statement and positive sensations when you make the negative statement. For some, the sensations will occur specifically in the heart space. Others will feel it in their belly. Others will feel it more generally in the body. And some will feel more of a direct knowing. If you're the direct knowing type, I can't explain what that will feel like to you. You'll literally just know. Positive sensations may feel lighter or like calmness, excitement, love, openness, or joy. Negative sensations may feel heavier or like anxiety, dread, shutting down, fear, or even anger. And I'm actually going to interject something here that's not written on the page. Sometimes tears will come, and tears are sometimes tears of sadness. Tears are sometimes tears of positive affirmation. I call those tears of truth. And I'm adding that actually because someone had just emailed me today saying that they were doing this practice and getting like the positive truth tears. So I just wanted to put that in here because I actually didn't write it on the page. So back to what it says on the page, a neutral sensation, meaning you don't really feel anything, can mean not right now. So if you're a person who tends to make better choices if you have a chance to sleep on things, do this practice a few days in a row and see what the most consistent sensations are for you. This is a practice of tuning into and trusting your body's wisdom instead of the overly analytical function of the mind. So that's like a specific and relevant example of how to use this practice in context. You can use this for anything. You can put those positive and negative statements to like any decision that you're trying to make, whether it's what to have for breakfast, to go out on a date with someone, to read a book, to order something on Amazon, like all kinds of things. And this is from my Yes, No Truth practice that I developed many years ago, which is also another thing I didn't realize I didn't make up. There are lots of practices like this out there. And by the way, side note, if you don't believe in collective intelligence, I don't know what to tell you because that shit is real. Anyway, this practice describes what a yes might feel like using the language of sensations. So let's ground this into another example. I don't want to make this episode as esoteric as the last one was. I want to keep this one really grounded. So if you had to describe what happiness feels like in your body, what would you say? So when you feel happy, what are the sensations you feel in your body? So happiness is an emotion. When you're happy, that's the emotional content. But when you tune into your body, there are also sensations that indicate that you're really happy. Maybe it's a smile. Maybe it's a tingling in your heart or a fluttering in your belly. What's so important about this aspect of embodiment is that when you're connected to your body, you're much less likely to bypass or bullshit yourself as much. So it's not a perfect system, nothing is. And our ability to bypass and bullshit ourselves is sophisticated, but our ability to understand our body's unique language of the senses is also sophisticated and serves as an antidote. And this is why it's so important to get out of your head and into your body, which is another tagline for my work. Get out of your head and into your body. So to go deeper into this, a question I often ask people is, what do you feel and where do you feel it? And I really try to get people to be very descriptive. Is there a texture, a density, light or heavy, right? A color? How would they describe the sensations? I get them to really go into it. Because there's also tremendous value in being able to describe the sensations without attaching emotion to it. So again, you can learn to discern between the two when faced with either or both. Which brings me to a point I brought up and bookmarked in last week's episode that I briefly just touched on right now in the yes, no, truth practice. And that's the difference between judgment and discernment. When we're judging, we're in our heads and we're disconnected from the wisdom of the body, period. Discernment brings in the body's wisdom. It allows us to feel for what's real and what's true, as opposed to only just thinking about it or analyzing it, or making a pros and cons list, or trying to be rational about something. Because the rational choice is not always the best choice if it's not informed by the body's wisdom. Discernment brings in the body's wisdom, helps us to feel for what's real and what's true. And this is an invaluable skill to develop, and it is a skill, and it is developable. I don't know if developable is a word, but you get the point. This is part of what we do in Power, and it's, something I've been working on for many, many years and something I really geek out on. So I went to a workshop recently with Michaela Bohm, who has been on the podcast episode, who has been on the show here twice, 2 different episodes, one in 2015 and one just a couple months ago. Now, I want y'all to know, I don't go to a lot of workshops. I'm a facilitation snob, and I trust very few people to hold a space the way I need it to be held to engage. But Michaela is amazing, and I totally trust her. So the workshop was called Radical Intimacy and the Deep Erotic. Part of my journey right now is I am on a year of intentional dating, and I'm really in the inquiry of if I want to be a monogamous person or if I don't. So applying this deeper embodiment specifically in the context of intimacy and sex and dating and relationships is something that's a top priority for me right now. So it was an edge for me, I will say. I don't remember if I already said the name of the workshop. It was called Radical Intimacy and the Deep Erotic. And it was an edge for me to go alone, knowing full well there was high potential that throughout the course of the workshop, I might be partnered with people I wouldn't want to do partner work with. And that did happen a few times over the weekend, but that's a story for another day. So what happened at the workshop is there were so many practices and exercises, and part of it was really affirming to me because, again, like I've mentioned like 3 times in this episode, so much of my own work I've developed of my own volition, but without knowing that it already existed somewhere in the world. And I find that a lot in Michaela's work, which is really cool because she's someone with 2 PhDs in psychology, decades of deep practice. She's a lineage holder. So that is very affirming to me, but it's also really amazing when I can go learn new things. And I learned plenty of new things at this workshop. So there were 2 exercises in particular. I won't describe them because I don't want to share her content, but the experience of it was getting to practice reading my partner for the purpose of feeling into their senses. So a lot of what I teach in Power and in my Wild Slow Movement Weekend workshops is about, navigating your own body's unique language of the senses, that embodiment language. And so this is a little bit more of an advanced teaching, which is when you're pretty fluent in your own body's language and to begin practicing feeling into what's going on with other people, which a lot of you probably do that naturally. We all have the ability to do that, but some of us who are empaths or highly sensitive people have an ability to do that that's a little more innate and a little bit more, I would classify it a little bit more as not a skill, but as a gift. So for me, that is definitely one of my gifts. And so it was cool to go to this workshop and get some practice and also real-time reflection of the accuracy of my reads. And so part of it was getting to feel into the partner based on senses alone. So not feeling for their emotions, not the emotional content, right? But just, their senses, what was going on in their body. Then there was another practice where we were reading the partner for the purpose of acknowledging them and feeling into what was truth and allowing the truth to land. And so getting to reflect that back to someone and then getting feedback again if what I was sensing was accurate for the other person. It was really amazing because my reads were very accurate. Like my partners were blown away. So that was a really cool thing. And this is something that we could do with ourselves and others. And I bring this up because what's so important here is as you begin to really practice and deepen this for yourself, you will automatically be sharpening your ability to do it with others. But I bring this up because even for those of us with the raw ability and gift to do this, we have to use it responsibly, which means with permission. Reading people without permission is a cosmic no-no. There are karmic implications for this, and I highly suggest not messing with it. And any of you who have, gone to workshops before or worked with intuitives or healers, there's implicit permission in attending a workshop or in doing a session with someone. But if any of you have ever had the experience of someone reading you without your permission or telling you, like, I'm getting a sense that ... again, without asking you, that's really an invasion of privacy. And that's something that me personally, I, over the years, have had to realize I was doing, but by accident. And I'll give you a really good example. A couple of years ago, I think of a friend of mine who, to me, it was clear as day that he had a crush on another friend of mine. But to him, that was a secret, not something that he had told anyone, and something that he really thought that he was doing a good job of keeping to himself because he wasn't ready to say anything about it. And I just straight up brought it up to him one day, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on with your crush on so-and-so? And he just looks like a deer in headlights. I knew it to be true. And it was a truth that he was not ready to share with anyone. And he felt it was very vulnerable for him. And I felt really bad about it. And he was like, oh my God, like that really threw me for a loop because I didn't think anyone knew. And so then he was self-conscious that he had been obvious about it and maybe she knew and like all this stuff. And that was caused by me reading him and saying something without permission, without asking or checking. And so, that's a subtle example versus a more like overt, aggressive example of the people who are like, I'm feeling into your heart and it feels like blah, blah, blah. And, sometimes those are not accurate at all. Those are just other people projecting their shit onto you. So I'm giving you a lot of these examples and I'm putting a lot of these things into context so you can see for yourself how they may or may not be showing up or have shown up in your life in the past. So now for this episode, again, to keep it grounded and practice and anchor this in, this is what my work on the deepest and most effective levels is about, teaching women about the sacred body. This is where and how I believe we get liberated from our culture's extremely wrong, disgusting, manipulative, overly sexualized, objectified, commodified, co-opted, and all the other big disapproving words we can use to describe how women's bodies are portrayed and valued externally, which we then internalize and believe ourselves, which then turns us into our own perpetrators, abusers, and oppressors, as well as perpetrators, abusers, and oppressors against each other. So I want to let that sink in. Does that make sense? We abuse ourselves. We oppress ourselves with diets, exercise, restriction, spending money, sometimes that we do have or sometimes that we don't have, to appear as we are not naturally made. And then we judge each other and we judge ourselves when we compare ourselves to others. We make certain aspects of appearances superior to others, and we participate in what I'm going to call, it might sound dramatic, but it's not, our own annihilation of the sacred body. Not just our own, but our sisters. So I'm here to say absolutely hell to the nah on this, and I hope that you will join me. So I was journaling about this in preparation for recording this episode this morning, and I'm going to read to you what I wrote straight up from my journal. We are all blessed, but doing the work to be receptive and aware when the blessings are raining down upon us is part of embodiment, so that we can feel divine truth despite what the outer world illusion or waking dream is telling us. So I'm going to pause here to say something that I didn't write in my journal, which is so many of us are numb to our blessings because we've had to numb ourselves, because we've been so programmed and conditioned by this culture, and we feel so much pain and so much, pain, suffering, challenges, whatever. So at a certain point, sometimes we do shut down. We do close off because it's intense and it's a lot. So let me start over. We are all blessed, but doing the work to be receptive and aware when the blessings are raining down upon us is part of embodiment, so that we can feel divine truth despite what the outer world illusion or waking dream is telling us. That is not to say that things like suffering and oppression aren't very real, but it is to say that they never have to be permanent. Many of us here on the earth at this time came here to dissent, disrupt, and dismantle. And not only that, but we also came to catalyze a reharmonization of things. So the larger implication of embodiment is rooted in revolution. And I'm going to say that again, and I want you to close your eyes if you can and soak it in. And now if you can't close your eyes because you're driving or you're in public or something, instead, take a big deep inhale, like breathe it in. And actually, if you can, do both. Close your eyes and take the big inhale as I say it. The larger implication of embodiment is rooted in revolution. Now, practice embodiment here. What do you feel? Where do you feel it? What did that bring up for you? And that'll be one of our reflection questions, so I'll repeat that later. Now, here's the scary part about embodiment, because I want to be real with you. The scary part about embodiment is feeling and facing things that you don't want to feel or face. It's the sensitization of all that we've consciously and unconsciously desensitized ourselves from. This is why we talked about alchemy last week in episode number 2 of this series, and the dance and interconnection and inextricability between the light and the dark, the conscious and the unconscious. Because when we really allow our feeling senses to come online, we're signing up, like we're literally raising our hand to feel it all. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're an empath or a highly sensitive person, you might already be someone that feels so much, which then begs the question, how will you possibly survive? Because a lot of us have built up these walls and these protection mechanisms so we don't get bowled over by everything that we feel all the time. And that's where the arc of power comes in, which we will discuss in episodes 4 and 5 of this series, so next week and the week after. And what the arc of power is the exploration of surrender and release, trust and receptivity, wild dreaming and desire, and love and truth. This arc of power to embodying our own power and really living in and with and from courage and truth and compassion and kindness and love, which is what our body's wisdom, those are like the pillars of our body's wisdom. That is all the protection you could ever possibly need. I know that might be a lot to believe, or you might not believe me right now, which is okay. That's why I created a year-long experience to help us all with it. And this is something myself, it's taken me many years to trust and believe and embody. But now that I have, everything is much easier. And as well, this is how we all can become safer in the world and safer for the world. And that's a newer tagline for my work since developing power. Becoming safer in the world and safer for the world. So what I mean by that is when you're embodied, you make better choices. You can feel for truth and alignment, which means what's in integrity and what's not. What is your higher calling and what isn't? What's the right way to treat people and what isn't? What actually is coming from your soul and what's coming from your conditioning? In power, I call this discerning between the desires of the ego and the desires of the soul. And these are big concepts. They're important concepts. But something you'll hear me say a lot is that concepts are useless without embodiment and practice. That's why we talked about deep committed practice last week. I don't care how much you know. I care how much you practice, and I care how much you embody. And to be honest, that's not a great way to say it. It doesn't matter what I care about. The results speak for themselves. So I hope you got a ton out of this episode today. Here are the reflection questions for this episode. And again, these are posted if you're just tuning in and if you just haven't gotten around to it yet. We have a free private pop-up Facebook group through the end of the month, through December 29th. If you want to join in the community exploration of everything I'm talking about in this journey into the wild soul. And I post these reflection questions in there. So if you don't want to like pause and like have to write them down, just come on over into the Facebook group. You can find that by going to wildsoulmovement.com/pop-up-FB. Again, that's wildsoulmovement.com/pop-up-FB. And as a reminder, I give you a bunch of questions so you can do any of the following. You could choose one and go deep with it, or you can answer just some of them, or you can answer all of them and go wider. So remember, it's totally up to you. Don't feel pressured by them. Let them be an invitation into your curiosity so you can practice trusting and following that and where it leads you. So the questions are, what's alive for you around embodiment after listening to this episode? Where do you feel like you need it? Where are you already practicing it, perhaps, without realizing that you were, or maybe intentionally? As well, what came up for you when I said the larger implication of embodiment is rooted in revolution? And to piggyback on that, the final question is, what's your personal embodiment revolution about? So one final thought for you all, being in your body makes everything better, easier, and more grounded, which helps enormously towards living a life of integrity, impact, and connection. Now, based on the condition of your body, if you are healthy or not healthy, and health is a very loaded term, so I'm going to leave that to you to define. But if you have illnesses or injuries, or if you have physical pain in the body, again, going into the body, if you have trauma, going into the body can be a scary endeavor, right? And so, again, I want you to approach this however it is, at whatever pace feels good and right to you, because it's going to be a different experience for everyone. So it's enormously valuable, but it's loaded and it takes practice. And in a lot of cases, we really need some support to do it safely and with a lot of care. So thank you so much for listening. This is episode number 283. The show notes can be found at untameyourself.com/283. And remember, enrollment for Power is officially open now. And there is that first 30 bonus if you're listening in real time. And that gets you a one-on-one coaching call or a Wild Soul Oracle reading with me. So if you've been thinking about it, jump on it if it feels right. I'd love to connect with you one-on-one. The details for that are at wildsoulmovement.com/power2019. And that wraps up episode number 3 of the Journey into the Wild Soul series. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sharing if you've been sharing the series with your friends and loved ones or just on social media. Thank you for tagging me on Instagram and in your Insta stories, all those fun things that you all do every single week after these episodes. I appreciate it so much, and we'll see you next week. You were saying something about that tall poppy syndrome. What is that, if anyone listening doesn't know?
So it's really, it's part of the vernacular in Australian society, and I think the United Kingdom. It's really that experience of being too tall, too much, too beautiful, too brilliant, too. And you need to get cut down to size, sugar. You need to get cut down to size. And it's very visceral, and it's, and I have days of things that I want to say about that because it is so extremely painful to experience it. And I think even more painful is that unconsciously we've contributed to it. So I think about this in the context of, I talk about we canonize people and then we demonize people, right? Ooh. So we do this kind of bell curve of, putting people up on a pedestal. And then when they start to zig when we want them to zag, we cut them down, we demonize them. And again, it's pretty unconscious. And I think it's I can feel it in my chest as I say, I think this is one of the biggest reasons people are afraid of success, because they have, ancient recollections of having this happen to them, and they've seen where they've participated in it too.